Hello guys, how are we doing and welcome back to the channel. I have my another Perfection Hardpoint episode today where I go through all the Hardpoint maps and give you guys the best setups on each hill. Today is probably the final one unless they add more maps into the game, and it's 6-star. It's the new map added to Season 3 and I like it. So we're going to be just going through the most unbreakable setups you guys can have and hopefully implement into your 4 stacks. However, if you are a solo, duo or trio queuer, this is still going to be beneficial. Hopefully this inspires you to know where you need to be picking up, what lanes you can be watching, and what FOV, like what line of sights you can be watching, so that you can ensure no gaps are in your setup. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So start on P1 just here, which is middle of the map, and I'm doing this one hardpoint from both perspectives because obviously you can't really help where you spawn in. However, it's assumed the best case scenario following that, so this is assuming you already get good spawns. Now if you don't know, we are going to chest on spawns very slightly because obviously the positioning you're going to have for these setups does mean you're going to be affecting the spawns slightly, but if you do want a full spawn guide breakdown, I have a spawn guide platform series playlist, whatever you guys want to call it, down below, so make sure you guys check that out as well if you want to know a little bit more about spawns on 6-star. So we're taking the perspective of the blue team here, who are spawning this bottom half of the map, and the red team is spawning yellow. So first things first, we've got a player here with an AR, preferably sat or laying down on this, like the monument side, and just beaming down this alley. They're making sure that when they come off spawn, if they want to go right, they're stuck here. You've then got a player top balcony here, looking over P1, basically ensuring that the player getting time isn't really affected by anyone pushing the hill. And then, again, potentially have an AR. And then finally, you have a player here whose main focus is to watch the mid-cut from pool if an enemy decides to run up to balcony and jump out like so. The final player we've got is the guy on time. Now, this is ideally going to be a sub player because they're going to be like mixy in the hill, and their main role is to basically make sure that if they somehow find this gap, anyone who decides to run through middle, round you, and then challenge like this player will get it. This is a last resort. This player shouldn't really have to peek otherwise, which is on a 3-lane map like this, what should be happening. Now, you'll see there's orange lines as well, which dictate alternative perspectives that you can be picking up if like the situation deems it so. So if this player here decides that they haven't got much action left, and these three other players are communicating that there's all 4 enemies on them, this player can leave here, pull back a little bit, and literally watch this line of sight and saves up the you watch, so that if a player decides to get around to you, this guy will be having it rather than this player, and then this player can concentrate elsewhere. Talking to the player in the hill, they can literally be watching the pinch pretty much at all times if they feel like they need to. If this player dies over here, they can pick up the pinch and make sure that anyone on the red team doesn't get through and round like that. And then the player on balconies obviously can be watching this mid-cut as well. If this player says, oh crap, I've let someone through mid-cut, I can't, or pull stairs, I can't quite kill them, this player can go, okay, turn and beam them from here. We then have the pool player who, this is a bit of a weird one, but realistically, you can audibly hear anyone going into the pool. So this is, if this player hears anyone going into the pool, they should be able to get their kill quite simply. But realistically, it's going to be quite unusual for this players on this situation on the red team to dive into the pool unless they're rotating all the way back to new. Now, we're taking the perspective of the other side here. Now, let's assume red have the hill control and they're trying to get the best spawns possible. Now, obviously speaking, you're going to want to rotate all the way around to P2 at some point throughout this hold, but this is just as if you just got 4 down off the rep. Where do we set up to make sure that things are readable and obviously obvious for the next set of pushes? First things first, we've got a player back here who's literally watching you, but does have the alternative option if this player needs help to watch, go up onto the stage and look down middle as well. Again, you've got this player in P1 itself doing the exact same position. If this player lets anyone through, they should be able to be picked up by the submachine gunner who's sat on hill. You then have a player here who can, as I say, the orange line exists to show that he can help out middle as well. But their main focus is really just watching the blue team run down the stairs. The final player, who's potentially the most important player in this setup, even though they look really far out of the way, is the player in pool. They're basically sat behind this sort of area in the pool, like this statue, whatever you want to call it, watching their push through P2. Now, with this player here, this player is actually blocking spawns right here, and it's forcing the blue team to actually have really bizarre spawns all the way out here. Now, what that means is that the enemy team are then going to be likely to flood through statue all the way to P1, Or you might get the odd person to go all the way back round and challenge the middle here. But realistically, they're going to be spawning here with this player Paul. And as a result, are probably going to run straight through statue to hill, which is why a lot of the focus is on this middle intersection, just like here. So yeah, that's the best setups for P1. Then take a look at P2. Now we're assuming that red team have maintained their control of P2, and you don't necessarily want to flip on P2. It's quite nice to have these spawns. So in the setup we've got here, the red team spawns are green and yellow, and the blue team spawns are teal and blue. Now they are only going to be spawning at one place each based on this setup, but we'll get into that in a minute. So first things first, you have the player sat in hill, laying down in the cushions, literally just watching the vent, because it's a line of sight that no one else is watching, so they need to pick this up. Next, we have a player poolside who's sat, on the benches watching the mid cut. So if anyone on the blue team decides to get through middle, they're cut off by this player. But this player is also, you'll see the yellow ring around them. This player is also blocking the yellow spawn so that anybody who dies from the blue team can't spawn here. We then have a player here, right in the depths of the spawn. And he's basically, their main role realistically is to ensure that these spawns are blocked. That's their sole primary purpose, is to ensure that the blue team, because in this situation, if this player wasn't here, they would spawn out. So this player is essentially there to make sure that the blue team keeps spawning this side of the map and making it much more predictable. I haven't drawn a line, bizarrely, I don't know why I must have forgotten, but they can, in the meantime, whilst they're doing this, look down middle as well, just to be that extra double check to make sure that they can't get through. But realistically, if this guy dies and the remaining three are getting kills, the blue team are going to spawn here, and it's not the best situation because then they're spawning at P3. So this player really needs to play their life back here and do all they can. Now, we have a little of a weird player down here, player number 1. Again, all players I've listed should have arguably these two should have an AR because the line of sights have got a fairly long distance. This player can have a sub, and this player can have a sub 2. This player sat just next to the stairs going to the pool side or going to this vent, and what they're doing here, you'll see this teal ring around them. They're blocking this close blue spawns, which essentially spawns the blue team all the way out towards office. Now what this does is it forces the enemy team to have to run either all the way back round to get to them, which they could do, or they're inclined to run through middle, which is why you've got a couple of people watching middle. This person's holding this cut, and they can see anyone who tries to get around this side, and then this player here is watching the vent because that's probably where they're going to be pushing from. Now, let's say this player dies in this setup. You should really fill the gap. So the player closest to him switches with that player, and then you basically fill in. So let's say this player dies here. This player moves to that position, this player moves to that position, this player then moves to that position, and then this guy's going to spawn in so he can pick up the flank just like so. That's how it should work. It should be okay, the person furthest forward dies, fill the gap, fill the gap, fill the gap, fill the gap. It's as simple as that. And that's how every good hardpoint team works. If you ever watch Call of Duty, professional Call of Duty, you'll see that's literally how it works. So yeah, in this setup, the yellow team probably will honestly spawn yellow. Meanwhile, the blue team are going to be spawning all the way over here, forcing them to either take a big route all the way back round or run through middle. Now, again, assuming red side spawns have been kept here, these are the best setups for P3. Now, P3 is a super sticky hill. If these back yellow spawns are not blocked, the team, whoever respawns in first, will spawn back there. So you need to make sure that if no one's back here blocking this, someone's at least watching it, especially if you get the first kill. But you'll notice in this setup I've got here, obviously these setups are just ideas. They're not going to be the perfect setup. You might have a better team who works differently. You might have a team of 4 ARs, and therefore these setups might not work to you. But realistically, this is, if in the best situation possible, this is probably what will work best. So anyway, you've got this player back here with an AR, preferably, who is, blocking the spawns. But whilst they're doing that, they are ensuring that nobody can sort of come through this mid-cut. They're sort of watching this. We then have a player, but he's essential. This player here is essential to staying alive, because if this player dies and the rest of the team are getting kills, the blue team are going to spawn behind. And that leaves for a lot of unpredictability. And it's just not ideal. You want them spawning out. You want them having to run up maybe 3 lanes of sight, line of sights in order to get to the hill. We then have a player sort of in P1, and it's their job to ensure that they can't even get to middle. They can't even get to the point where this player might die. So they're watching the mid-cut from pool stairs, and they're watching the mid-cut through their spawn as well. So if they decide to spawn in blue, spawn in teal, run through vent, and through here, this player's got this side, line of sight and the line of sight to pool stairs. Then we've got the players who are actually around the hill directly. Now, you'll notice in order to break this, the only way you'd actually lose in this setup is if a blue team went all the way, if they spawned in, decided to run all the way around like so, and channels like that. Obviously, no one's going to do that. So yeah, the remaining 2 people are literally there to watch the 2 remaining cuts on the hill. So you've got a player sat on the bushes here, watching the jump up. It's a very free kill if anyone decides to jump up, which people tend to not to, which is why you probably do see a couple of people take routes through middle. And then you have a player who sat on a little cruddy spot on the bar, watching these steps upwards. And then from this position, you're not really going to die. If you get one, you're at minimum going to get 1 player. You may get traded by a second guy if they got you weak, but realistically, you're getting 1 kill. And then, as I say, you can then, the next player then fills in the gap, until you got the setup back again. Moving on to P4. This is a little bit of a weird one. If you guys remember Hydroelectric from the last map, you have 1 person pretty much, for the best setup, you have pretty much 1 person blocking spawns, not really doing much, but they play a pivotal role. And that player here is this little guy, all the way at the bottom of the map. Ideally have a sub, but realistically they can roam anywhere sort of around this area. This is just a suggested area because it's closest to the hill, so if the worst case scenario happens, all your teammates die, they can at least be there fairly quickly. Now, they could be further back here, but again, that just leaves a little bit more distance to P4. But this player's main role, as you guys can probably guess, is to literally just watch to ensure that the spawns don't flip. The team in this setup are pushed quite far up, so it's essentially you do have someone here committed to the flip. So yeah, this player's here, can watch the mid cut in case they decide to get flanked or get through, but their main purpose is to block these 2 back spawns. Now from here we have a player who sat on the hill time, and they're literally just watching the hop up through the glass corridor here, which, you know, as you guys know, you can get under and hop up. So they're watching this, so they're on top of the plant pot in the hill. To get to that plant pot, you need to jump from the stairs upwards, but once you're up there, it's absolutely dominant. And they have almost a secondary line of sight, so if they stand up from that plant pot, they can see over the wall, over towards the statue to see if anyone pushes from front. And that's probably only really going to happen if this player in you communicates that they need a little bit of assistance. But generally speaking, the player on the hill's only real job is to make sure they can't get a hop up. It's a free kill every time because they're going to have to mantle over the obstacle to get into the hill, so it's going to be a free kill every single time. Talking to this player is literally just sat in you with an AR, watching this line of sight. Any player that decides to run through are going to get beamed by this guy here. But as I say, if they need help, this player on hill can just stand up and look over for assistance. We then have a player here. You'll notice there's a teal ring around it. And the reason why there's a teal ring around this player is because he is blocking this closer spawn. He's ensuring that the blue team are spawning all the way back here and almost forcing them to run down this narrow corridor. Because of the way the game positions you, you're literally facing this direction, so you're just inclined to just run forward. So most teams you play against would literally spawn here and run down here. But let's say they don't. Let's say that's not the case and someone does decide to run through here. This player is also watching this mid-cut. So they're pushed quite far up. 1, to watch this mid-cut, and 2, to make sure they don't spawn here, but they spawn here. So this player is almost just as pivotal as this guy. Now, let's say this guy wasn't here and these people were getting kills. It's very likely that the blue team are going to flip. So just be very careful that if no one's deep blocking spawns, but the rest of these players are here, I mean, say this guy decides to hop on hill with you and you get kills, they're going to spawn back here. So you just need to make sure that someone's blocking here as long as people aren't too pushed up. A lot of people do have a tendency to get some kills and then push up even further into their spawn, which I probably don't advise unless you want to flip. Again, taking a position of red team here, and this is the best setup for P5. So we'll start with this player just here. So there are 2 main spawns, one being teal and one being yellow. Being this close to yellow, this player here is blocking it. So it ensures that the blue team won't ever have a scenario where they spawn behind you because this player's deep further back enough. If they stepped a little bit far forward into P5, it leaves the spawn open, so they need to be just sort of over this line, really. They need to be like back behind this, anywhere like behind P2, really. But from here, they can watch the mid-cut as well as front, and with assistance of the person who's actually on P5, who we'll talk about now, actually. The person on P5 can have a sub, can have an AR. Ideally, this person will have an AR, because obviously the line of sights are massive. But this person here is really main job. 1, get hold time, and 2, they're on an unbeatable head glitch watching the stairs, so that anyone who comes up here are just going to get decimated by a guy in the pool. Now, the only limitation to this setup is the fact that if they decide to hop out down here, but realistically, if they hop up down here, this head glitch works just as well. But if they decide to flank, this is where this player here will be able to pick that up and challenge them from the back. But with this player here in with the teal circle around them, because they're pushed so far at the map, the blue team actually won't spawn here. They'll spawn all the way back here, which means they might not decide to just run and challenge this bit. They might decide to run through middle, which is why we have sort of 2 players watching. Now, obviously, depending on who you're playing against, you have to be a little bit flexible here. But a lot of the times, people spawn in here, you'll see have 2 players go left, 2 players go right, and as a result, we've allocated 2 players each. Now, if it happens so that, let's say, 3 players go here, and you're only dealing with 1 through here, you can sort of leave this player here. This player can run through, help out, front, check if anyone's hopping over, and this guy can be the sole person in charge and make sure no one can come through middle. But obviously I'm assuming that's not the case, so we'll just go with it. But obviously you guys know you still need to be adaptable to these setups. These aren't going to be foolproof. It is just a read on what the other team are doing. But yeah, these 2 players' jobs are to make sure you're watching, middle. They can't come from middle pretty much. So this player's top balcony, just watching over the P1, and this player's just in U, making sure that they've got the close angle for anyone pushing real close and decides to, flank you to perhaps kill this player top balcony. But yeah, this setup is good, but as I say, you need to be adaptable. If this player is communicating, there's 2 or 3 on me minimum. One of these guys, preferably this guy, should say, okay, give me a second, let me help out, and they just run across. This guy should be able to cover the run across, but then the player here can literally just sit here watching anyone jumping down, and you've got the help you need. So that's pretty much going to do it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this helped, and I shall see you in the next one. Ciao for now.